Welcome to The Economy. How do you measure that? The show where we explore how macroeconomic statisticians make sense of the trillions of transactions that happen every day and how they get all that turned into numbers you see on dashboards, in headlines, in the newspapers, and behind major decisions. I'm your host, Jim Tebrake, Deputy Director of the IMF Statistics Department, and today we're kicking off this series with a special conversation. Why do we measure the economy in the first place? What do these numbers mean? And why should you care how we measure it? Whether you're a policymaker, a researcher, or just a curious citizen trying to understand how all this is put together. Now, to help me unpack this today, I'm joined by Bert Kroese, who is Chief Statistician of the IMF, Chief Data Officer, and Director of the IMF Statistics Department. So there's nobody better to talk about this with than somebody who's been in the business for over 30 years, been measuring things for over 30 years. So Bert, I'm going to ask you the first question. Why is it important that we measure things in the first place?
Well, Jim, great question. Measurement, data, statistics, they underpin everything. If you're a government and you want to know whether to raise your interest rates, you need good data. If you need to know whether to expand the housing program, you need good data. If you know how to deal with a food price crisis, you need good data. So data is needed to make good policy decisions.
Okay, so certainly policymakers need this good data, but what about my kids? What about the average citizen? What about the business owner? Why do they need these data?
Well, they need data as well. And if you're a business and want to invest in your business, you need to know what's happening in the world around you. If you're a household and you want to deal with your budget, you need to know that. If you're a researcher and you want to do analysis, you need good data. So it's not only governments, it's also researchers, businesses, people. Good data are very important. Good measurement is essential.
Okay, so I opened the conversation by saying 1 trillion transactions each and every day. Is it true? Like, do you measure 1 trillion transactions each and every day? I mean, I've come to work, so I took the metro today, I had breakfast, I bought lunch. I mean, all those transactions, I'm working, that's a transaction. Like, you measure it all.
Conceptually, yes. Conceptually, the idea is that if you make national accounts, so the macroeconomic description, how the economy is doing in a country, you measure every and each transaction on the production, on the consumption, on the income. And obviously that's difficult. I mean, we don't have hundreds of thousands of people walking down the streets and recording everything. But conceptually, yes, that's the idea.
Okay, so there isn't 1,000 IMF staff members walking around the streets with calculators, adding everything up. So you're using surveys, administrative data, maybe big data. I've heard about big data.
Yeah.
I guess in the world of data, that's always changing as well.
Yeah, that's why profession is so interesting. We don't calculate every individual transaction. We use surveys, as you mentioned, so we send out questionnaires and we ask information from business and people. We use data that is there already in governments, administrative data. We try to make use of new big data sources, scanner data, financial transaction data, and all that we put together as one big puzzle to make these national accounts, this macroeconomic description that conceptually indeed covers all the production, consumption, and income in an economy. Okay,
so then let's get behind the motivation for this show. I mean, you're the director of the department, you're the sponsor of this show. The show is called The Economy. How do you measure that? Why is it important that people actually understand how we measure things? Why is it important that they understand how we measure something like donuts or house owner occupied household services? Why is this important?
Because it's more complex than you would think. Using data is dangerous if you don't know what they mean, how they're defined. And our world is so complex, and statisticians make choices. They make choices how to measure things, what to measure, what not to measure. And by understanding how data are compiled, you're better able to interpret them, to use them, and also to avoid common misunderstandings.
Yeah, I certainly see that point. I mean, if you don't know what's behind a number and how it's put together, how can you properly use it? But I'm going to flip it around now, and I'm going to ask you. This is our last question. So it's got to be a good one. But, you know, the economy is constantly changing. Like, how do you make sure that you're always, you know, we're going to have the 4th trillion transaction coming up. How do you make sure you're measuring that transaction? Like, what do you do to make sure you're always measuring the right things?
Well, that, again, statistics is a very interesting topic. You need to be constantly aware of what is changing. Our role is to describe the economy and society as it is. And the economy and society are changing in a very rapid pace. The digitalization, the globalization, many things are changing. And our role is to keep up. And when new concepts, when new things come up, like cryptos, we need to define and find out how we should measure that, but also how do you measure them in practice. So also for compilers of statistics, as we call them, people who make the statistics, it's very important to constantly think, well, these things are happening, how are we going to measure that?
Sounds like statisticians need to be very curious people. They need to be very curious and I would say courageous, because if somebody asks you to measure 3 trillion transactions, I think you got to be a bit courageous to take somebody up on that offer. Well, I mean, there you have it. That's this very first episode of The Economy. How do you measure it? And I want to thank you, Bert, for joining us and really launching us on this journey to help people understand how we put these numbers together. Whether it's monetary gold, stolen goods, financial derivatives, we're going to be discussing all of these topics over the course of this show. But I want everybody to be rest assured that behind every one of those transactions, there's a statistician like Bert out there measuring it. So thank you very much. Please share, subscribe, and tune in for the next episode.